3.
You're listening to All Things 3D, where we talk about the world of fabricating, designing, and capturing in the third dimension.
Hi, this is Mike, and today it looks like I'm by myself. As you know, we were at Real 2015 over the last 2 days, and Chris had some work to catch up with him. He took a day off to be up there in San Francisco. I, on the other hand, made a commitment to Eric to be here today, so I'm pushing ahead and making sure that it happens. Through our previous interview, actually, I was our guest crasher, was it last Friday? He mentioned Eric that he was beta testing his extruder, but I did a little bit more research on Eric and found out, man, he is a wealth of information, so I'd like to introduce him today. So say hi, Eric.
Hi.
Hi. So Eric, obviously we know your name, but what's your last name?
Lien.
Lien. And you sound like you have somewhat of a accent.
That'd be the Midwest. I've got Minnesotan in the veins, so.
We had the group from Fargo 3D Printing. Have you heard of them?
I haven't.
They're actually up from Fargo, North Dakota, and even though they don't seem to have much of that Minnesota type, they can really play it on. So it's kind of fun that they actually were from Fargo, so we had a little bit of talk about that. So they do a YouTube channel as well. So where do you reside? I mean, obviously you said the Midwest. Where exactly?
Yeah. So I'm in a north suburb of St. Paul, Minneapolis, in Minnesota. So, yeah,
wow.
Yeah.
Okay. So, what's funny is that, we've had a few people, I don't know if you're familiar with Me CNC, they're from Ohio. Maker Gear is from Ohio. As I mentioned, Fargo Printing is up in North Dakota. And then we have you, that's in Minnesota. You seem to be, everybody thinks, well, maybe it's the East Coast and something on the West Coast, but there really seems to be a hotbed right there in the central part of America, and I just think that's kind of cool. And I don't know if you've noticed that as well.
Yeah, actually pretty excited to be going out to, if you've ever heard of the Midwest Rep Festival. They call it
Exactly.
MERF.
I was going to bring that up. So you're actually going to see John Ollie, if you have not already. He's the one that's putting it on, so good. I'm glad that you're going to be out there. I was hoping that Chris would be out there. I don't know if we'll be able to make it. I've been on the road. I was at CES. We just got finished with the 2015. I've been invited to go back out to the South by Southwest at the end of March. So I've got my hands full. I'm going to be a moderator on one of the panels for Autodesk. So that should be pretty cool. So let's kind of jump into some other questions. Well, actually, we didn't finish it up. What do you do for a living? I mean,
so I'm a project manager at a Foundry. So in 2011, I was previously working in industrial material handling, automation, paint systems, powder coating, and things for around 10 years out of college, and then had my first son, and I was traveling a lot for that last job. So my brother worked at a ductile and gray iron foundry and said they're looking for a project manager. So I interviewed there, and it was a nice change. A really young group actually for Foundry, which is pretty nice. It's pretty atypical. A lot of the median age at Foundries is 50, 60-year-old veterans, and so having people in their 20s and 30s, kind of taking on that, it's a really interesting field. So a lot of fun making that change, and I get to spend time with the family, which was really important.
Yeah, and I noticed, if you notice behind me here, I've got your Google Plus page on, and that was the first thing that I noticed is that you have a couple of kids, young ones at that, and so I know that having young children, it's important to kind of find some time for them. We don't want them to be fatherless, and sadly, a lot of people in the technology industry don't have a lot of time, so I appreciate that you have your commitment to your family. So with that, we'll kind of move into some of the things that obviously you must be doing in your other spare time, and I'll bring it up. It's HercuLien, but when I went out to actually look for it, I didn't capitalize the L in HercuLien, and in fact, I have a little on my end, when we go back to my screen, my little lower thirds for you didn't capitalize the L. It appears that it's important because if you just do a search for HercuLien with lowercase l, it doesn't come up with anything until I did it with the uppercase L. Did you know that when you did this, or?
I didn't, but the way Google kind of caters your own search results to you, sometimes you don't, when you've searched for something enough, you think that everyone sees it the same way, but Google does a sometimes pretty good and sometimes pretty bad job of catering your own results to you, so you're kind of in a bubble and you don't know, so that's good to know. Thanks.
Well, just keep in mind, just use the uppercase L and you'll be in good shape. On that note, let's kind of talk about is it HercuLien? How did you pronounce that?
Yeah, so it's HercuLien is how I pronounce it.
Okay.
Eric Lien. So I was.
That makes sense.
Yeah, so I originally built a Core XY printer. How I got into printing in the first place is I had a friend who had an i3 kind of right after it had come out. And so he built.
Back up a minute. What's a Core X? I mean, for us.
So a Core XY printer. So it basically has two motors connected by, they're connected with the same kind of set of belts. So they're working one motor rotating in one direction and one in the other. I can actually show you really quick if you want. I can grab it. Yeah.
Great.
So hold on just a sec. Let me grab
the neat
piece.
thing about doing it over video is that you can actually show us what we're.
Yeah.
So for our audience out there
Give me
who's going to
just a
join us
second
in
here.
audio only, he's going to give us a visible demonstration of a Core X, and if you have a chance, go out to our YouTube channel and take a look at it.
So. All right, so my first printer that I designed, and it's actually out on my GitHub. I've got a few different designs out there, and it has two belts. Let's see if I can get this framed up here.
It's pretty good. You're doing great.
Yeah, so it actually has two belts, but they're actually tied together, so they go. I think it was MIT kind of came up with this kinematic style, and so it goes around the first stepper motor, around an idler to the carriage, and then the other end of it kind of does similarly and ties into that side of the carriage. And then this one does kind of the same thing, and they have a crossover point out here. And so if you just moved one stepper motor, it would actually move it at a 45-degree angle because the one stepper's holding static, and then this one's turning and it drives it. So it's kind of a what do they call that again? A coordinate transformation, I think, is what they call it when they have to.
That's exactly what it's called.
Yeah.
In fact, I don't know if you've worked with Delta printers, but obviously you take one more axis on it, and you got a very similar process where you have to drive them relative to one another in order to get the proper positioning. So very interesting. Well, thank you for that. So that's how you started.
Yeah. So my friend had a Prusa i3, and at the moment I saw it, I'm like, wow, this is so cool. 3D printers are in the scope of what a Midwest guy with two kids in his office can have nowadays. So I started researching on it, and I saw the MIT post about the Core XY, and I thought to myself, well, I could build something pretty big, and maybe be able to use it for work, printing out prototype patterns. Because one of the things that's really difficult about Foundry and castings is dimensional changes during the contraction, going from a liquid into a solid and things. So you've got your intention of what you want your net shape to be, but because of the way that sections will isolate and contract on themselves and they need feed metal, a lot of times you make your best first effort and then you're having to tweak the pattern, and that's pretty expensive in fully machined production tooling. So if you can know what those results are going to be beforehand with something inexpensive like a 3D printed impression, okay, well, this is going to draw in, this isn't going to collapse here, this core that's in this section is going to hold this area rigid where this will move, and then you can make, basically make the pattern wrong to make the part right. And that's so that's I thought I could maybe use it as a money-making endeavor.
So did it work?
Well, I do some stuff for work, which is fun. But actually, I spend most of my time printing out upgrades for my own printers because I kind of got into the hobby of it more than the finance of it. It's kind of become a labor of love. When I first started, I had no 3D modeling background at all. About 2 years ago, 20 months ago, whatever it was that I first started, I had used AutoCAD for 2D in my previous job. More for like plant layouts, conveyor layouts, process flows, but nothing as complicated as constrained 3D modeling. So, once I started using the software, really kind of fell in love with the creativity aspect of it and being able to, start a drawing, start a model, and within the same day have something to hold in your hand. It was just kind of inspiring and really captured me.
Well, let's hang there. I got a question later on, but since you brought up software, let's kind of talk about that right now. I'm almost, well, actually I've worked with 3D from a visualization standpoint for many years, but only in the last 2 years did I really want to be able to take imagery and convert it into tangible objects. So kind of like you, it's like I had a need for it, so I moved in that direction. And now I've designed actual components for other products, so I've gotten more into the solid modeling. So on that note, what are you using to do your solid modeling?
Okay. So I use SolidWorks because I have one advantage that's what my work uses. I'm not a design engineer, but it's what they use at work. So at first I started using it at night, when I had time outside of work to be able to do it. And then we have bulk licensing at work, so I'm able to check out a license at night to be able to do some of this stuff and do the modeling myself at home, which is a nice benefit. So yeah, using SolidWorks, and as far as a learning curve, as soon as you learn how the software wants to think about things, I think SolidWorks is so intuitive, and it really made the learning process easy. Lots of tutorials, and so I really kind of grasped onto it pretty quickly.
Being a startup myself, one of the concerns, I totally agree with you, and again, my co-host Chris, he uses SolidWorks on a day-to-day basis from a professional standpoint. The price point was the reason that I didn't move into it, and I've actually worked for many years with Autodesk within the job that I had previously as an IT manager for a design firm. And so I moved in that direction and just came out with a product called Fusion 360, which we covered at Real 2015 as well. That comes in at a very competitive price point. It doesn't have all the bells and whistles of SolidWorks, but for $300 a year, you have a very complete solid modeling program with some parametric as well as some, what's the word? Some testing and analysis functionality, which is one of SolidWorks' strengths. So with that note, I mean, did you buy the license outright? Because if I remember correctly, it's like $5,000 or $6,000.
No, so what I'm able to do, just because it's what my work uses, is so they've got floating licenses. So at nighttime when I go home, I can check out a license and check it back in the morning. So you basically, if you've got some design engineers that are going to be taking their laptops out on the road for some design company, they can check out a license and use it. I just have to make sure to check it back in the morning, otherwise our design engineer can't log in.
Yeah, as again, from an IT manager's perspective, I had to set up those servers that allowed you to do that, and Autodesk has a very similar feature. And for the most part, they work okay, but sometimes they don't work okay, and you have to manually check things in. But yeah, so that's great. So your work allows you to support that functionality, and it's good to see. I'm hoping Dassault makes a decision to come out either with a subscription process or maybe a light version that's a more reasonably priced, so that people who may not need all the powerful tools can get into it with some basics. So there's some encouraging news that may happen, but for now I'm a Fusion 360 person. So great to know that that's what you're working with. So on that note, let's see where we're at. Um, you said that you design a lot of your own components, and then I noticed in your Google Plus, which I'm going to jump to now, you have a lot of things that one of the things I read somewhere is that you like to get back to the community. So I'm assuming that you have a rep rap type influence there where they said, you know, that part of the idea is take something but then either redesign it or add to it and then bring it back to the community. And where was it? Here we go. Pay it for a giveaway. So can you kind of talk about that? So essentially, if I wanted to build a HercuLien, I could go out, find all the CAD files for this, and build it myself. Is that what I see?
Yep. Yeah. So I've got every file that I use to design my printer out on GitHub, and understanding that a lot of people don't have access to SolidWorks. I try and support a lot of different formats. I've got IGES and STEP
Shape?
and
Step,
XT
sorry.
and STL, and basically whatever SolidWorks will let me export it out as. Pro E, all the things that are an export option in there. I tried to put it out there so that way, someone with a different, flavor software could be able to have access to the files.
But, so why do you use GitHub? I mean,
It
some people
works
use
surprisingly.
GrabCAD and some other places to put solid models, and I use it from a software perspective. But actually, I'm a little surprised that you're using it for. And not the first time I heard it, but maybe it's becoming more popular because it's more of an open source functionality. So, but let me let you talk now.
Yeah, so I was actually recommended that at Maker Rep Rap Fest in last year. So I went out there with my Core XY at that time, which I've since rebuilt and redesigned into HercuLien, which is more of an Ultimaker style kinematics. And there was someone there who was in the from Red Hat, and he recommended GitHub. He's like, GitHub doesn't care what the file type is. It's really good at revisioning and pushing and collaboration. And I've really taken to it. It's nice that people can do pull requests, so they can download the entire library right in the software, make edits to it, and then make recommended edits back into the master. And actually have several people now building HercuLien. I think it's like 6 people actively building one right now, and one individual is making great efforts to write up documentation and assembly videos, and he's pushing that back into the master. And so it's been just a great collaborative tool. I know there's other ones out there, and what do they call them, PDMs or whatever, project
Hmm.
development modules or whatever whatever
Yeah,
that
I use
stands for.
two. I can't think of their names now. I use one for the app that I'm working on. I'm working with another. Well, I guess I'm a paid consultant, so my payer, I guess I'm the payee. Um, I've allowed him to come in there. Plus, I've got a few other software consultants working with me. So I use that from a project management standpoint. But I use GitHub to actually be the repository of my files. And like I said, I had seen somebody else use it, and as you said, it's agnostic on the type of files you put out there. And yes, I do like the polling functionality, plus you can fork it if you want to.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of features. And another good point is that it's free as long as you provide your stuff to the public. And the private cost, which is what I bought, is also very reasonably priced for GitHub, which I think was like $8, maybe not even that per month. So it's very reasonable. So it's good to see that other people are using it for other uses. Okay, let's get to the big question. What is HercuLien?
Okay, so HercuLien is a dual extruder FDM printer. Currently, the build volume as it's designed right now, I'm trying to squeak little centimeters, millimeters out here and there, but is around 338 by 358 by 320 vertical build volume.
Okay, so
3D
if you're
printer.
not into metrics, what does that work out into, what do we
I
call
think
that,
it's
the
roughly,
imperial?
just, yeah, 14, 14, 13 and a half, something like that. If I can,
Okay.
I'm not good at the conversions. I've started thinking metrics, so actually it's hard to
Oh, I
think
love
backwards.
metrics.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I can think that way too, but sometimes, if you, I guess if you're an American or in the English system, sometimes that's doesn't always relate to it. So that's a fairly big build volume, and from what I could see from the HercuLien design, you have more of a rectangular shape or a frame type shape. How would you describe it?
Yeah, so it's an extruded aluminum kind of exo frame. I use 20 by 80 extruded aluminum kind of in the top and the bottom to kind of create, cage box frames that support the upper gantry area, and then also the kind of Z drive assembly down below. Um,
Do you
so
have one behind you? Can we take a look at one? Or I'm
yeah,
trying to
yeah.
find a. Okay, so I've got a picture here as well. So let me see if I can.
Yeah. And if you go to my GitHub, there's actually a folder called Photos that have a fair amount of pictures
Yeah,
too with
I've got
close-ups.
one right here that I'll bring up. Does this one work?
Yeah, so that's actually the SolidWorks model. I did a render of it. So I tried to make it as complete as possible, because the thing that I found building my first printer is all the things that I forgot. Nuts, bolts, bolts being too long, because I figured, oh, I'll need some 10 millimeter bolts, and I'd tighten them down and they'd bottom out in the extrusion because I forgot to thicken up a flange. All those little things that you forget. So I tried to make it as complete as possible. The outlet and the fuse for the outlet from Amazon, all of the belts, power supplies, just so somebody trying to take on the project wouldn't have to reinvent the wheel. But if they wanted to, they have all the files to decide what they want to keep and what they want to change. So I have it right behind me too, if you want me to kind of grab the webcam and do a little
Yes,
walk.
please. Let's do so.
Okay, I think I've got enough room here on the.
And while you're doing that, I'll just jump back out to your site, look for that photos, and maybe run through a few of those.
Yeah. I think I can zoom this out now.
Now, the images that I see here, are you using the new extruder from Martin on this, or is
The
this?
the photos that are in there are a little bit older now, so that actually has I created basically an air tripper variant that I called the HercuStruder, because it was kind of the first thing I started building up before I converted my printer over. The thing that kind of drove me to convert my printer from a Core XY is Misumi had this, what do they call it, free first 150 promotion going on. And so I bought some extrusions and some lead screws, and I built a Eustathios, I think is how it's pronounced. It's by Jason Smith. Him and Tim Ralstad, who is started the Ingentus printer, which is a variant on the Tantalus printer, which is a variant on the Ultimaker. There's kind of a family of printers with this sort of setup. And so Jason made one that used belts instead of SpectraLine, and had a really nice package where the drive motors were below the bed and everything. So I liked that one so much, I built it, and you kind of see that right there. I'm making another variant on that one right now to try and simplify things, add more build space and everything. And so that's what I'm working on right now. Is I'm calling it the Eustathios Spider 2, because I have the version 1, which is basically a one-for-one to Jason's, and I've made some improvements, and I'm kind of pushing that out there for people.
Okay, so this is a variant of the HercuLien? HercuLien?
Actually, the
Or
HercuLien is started out as kind of a variant on the Ingentus and the Eustathios.
okay.
So Tim and Jason did some amazing work, and they put all of their stuff out there, and I liked it so much. My prints became far more accurate with the Eustathios. The speeds were great. Not quite Delta speeds, but pretty darn fast. Ultimaker makes a really great printer, in that that gantry system with the rotating rods keeping the bushings and everything in alignment, and that kind of breaks the friction as that rod rotates for it to translate down. It's a really nice setup. So I
So
liked it so much.
which printer was that again?
Eustathios.
No, the one that you just mentioned that you borrowed from.
Uh, so yeah, that's the Eustathios or Ingentus. Ingentus was kind of the the first one, and so you'll see a lot of my posts aren't in just the general 3D printing forum. A lot of them are in that community because I've really grown attached to that community. There's some really great people in there, and we're sharing a lot of ideas. That's where that print it forward campaign thing that you kind of brought up before.
Mm-hmm.
I know that one of the limiting factors of 3D printers is a lot of times you need a 3D printer to make a 3D printer. So I printed out a full set of plastic kits for the HercuLien as a giveaway on the condition that the person who received them built a HercuLien and then printed a set, very rep-rap fashion for that. So, but all of that whole community was started by Tim, and he's working on another new printer right now. So it's just a great community environment. I really like everyone in there, and no one's got too much ego. Everyone's got a lot of knowledge, and everyone's kind of working together, which is really fun.
Yeah, I can imagine. So let me ask some questions. Now that I see you, well, actually for the last few minutes we've looked at it in Envy. So you have some type of enclosure, at least a lid on it. It looks like, because it's a dual extruder, you have two spools of filament.
Yeah.
And then I'm assuming this variant has the new Bondtech extruder?
Yeah, so on this one right now I'm using the, I don't know if you can see my camera, but this is the, yep. So this is the Bondtech extruder right now. This is another generation old already. Martin is probably he's a man in search of perfection. He doesn't let something sit too long before he starts making improvements to it. I probably have 30 variants of this thing printed out here over while we've been testing and playing and making improvements on that. This version is just pure Bowden, so on the underside it's got one of the E3D brass collar and plastic push fit connectors on it. But his newer version, which you saw last week, has an adapter, so it can be used for
direct drive. Yeah,
direct drive. So I've got a kind of a version of that here, and it's got a nice little kind of indexing area on there, so you could take and bolt that clamp down to an existing printer, and then it'll help hold the hot end perfectly vertical, and then just nice Bowden tube sort of feed into there to give it a nice even feed path into there. He does some amazing work, and that's one of those things that I've really learned to love about the community, is I've made some really good friends.
Well, actually, can you go back? I wanted you to go ahead and show us your hot ends in that. Obviously, you made a Bowden type extrusion system, and then so what type of filament are you working with? Are you using ABS? Do you use nylon, or does it really matter?
It doesn't really matter. I mean, I prefer ABS. To be honest, the hood alone does 90% of it for me. Not having a fan blowing around in the room, creating a lot of eddy currents, and then just that hood kind of retaining the heat so it doesn't go up. Heat rises, so the hood does 90% of it for me. I have all the panels to do the side panels on it, and I had those on when I had my Core XY, but I've been kind of redoing what the panels look like, so it doesn't currently have them on.
For us tinkerers or engineers or designers, a lot of times our equipment is always in pieces because it's always changing. So sometimes I'd like to have a polished machine just so that I could show a polished machine and have one that I always have access to. Yeah, it looks really nice. From a design perspective, I like the red hints of color there against the aluminum.
Yeah.
So it's a dual. What type of hot end are you working with?
So right now this one has E3D V5s in it. I've
Oh,
got both
okay.
V5 and V6 versions of the carriage because obviously the distances and things changed minor on them. Like on the V5s, you can fit two 40 millimeter fans in front of it, but on the V6s you can't because you start getting down by the heater block, and so I've got 30 millimeter fans on the V6 version and 40s on the V5, just because one thing, especially with PLA, it can be so sensitive to heat creep, and the V5 wasn't as good with PLA as the new V6 is, so that's why I went with the larger than stock fans on the V5, and that really made a big difference for me.
I don't know if you're familiar with the company. I just know the filament name. We're actually going to have them on. I think it's Polyflex, but essentially the material that I have been using, it's a PLA-based material. It's called Polymax. Have you heard of it?
I haven't, no.
Oh, I'll send you a link to it. I really swear by it. It has basically the durability, flexibility of ABS, but it's a PLA-based material, and it sticks well at about 60. I mean, I guess I could go lower or not even have a heated bed, but it really is a fantastic material, and it's kind of a hidden gem. A lot of people swear by ABS, but you do have to have a more controlled environment, and I found this. I've tried some other things the other day. I was doing some Pet Plus and some nylon, and I just kept going back to this. Sad thing, it only comes in white, but that's what paint's for. And
Yeah.
I do a lot of my design components out of that material now, and it's a fantastic. So I'll send you a link to it. I think you should grab some of it. I think you'll be very pleased with it. But I like your enclosure there. I'm going to have to build something like that as well because I have found the same thing. Some variances in currents, and I want one of the things that I did was put a screen around my deltas in order to minimize some of those drafts and currents. But as you said, it all rises out, and
Yeah.
then you don't have any containment. So I think that's a neat idea. And obviously, the original maker bot 2X or Replicator 2X did something like that. But well, thank you very much for the tour on that. That's exceptional. Now, what type of controller board are you working with? The front or the control panel looks very familiar. I've used that one as well. Not a big fan of its controller pod. It's too tweaky for me, but um,
So yeah, right now I'm using on the HercuLien. I've got the Azteg X3 V2 inside of there. Um, I really like Roy at Panacat, I think is how it's pronounced. He's been really good. I know that there's some finicky things kind of with all of the 8-bit rep wrap controllers and getting them tweaked in just right because the pinouts change, or this one has thermocouple inputs and this one doesn't, and yada
mhm.
yada. But as far as I was originally running this printer on pure 24 volts, so it was one of the few controllers out there that could handle high wattage 24 volts. If you do that with the standard ramps and try and push a 400 and 500 watt 24 volt heated bed, you're just going to pop the thing. And so
Mhm.
he was kind of one of the few guys that put a really substantial MOSFET in there that could handle higher currents. I've since switched over to 24 or 120 AC on my heated beds, and I'm
Wow.
never going back. Yeah, just hook up a solid state, a quality industrial solid state relay to your normal bed outputs. Run your mains, one of the legs in through the SSR to chop it, and the other one direct to the bed, and heat up times are minutes. Yeah, I
Wow.
can heat up to 110 degrees and holding rock stable in 5 minutes or less, and that's impressive for it's almost a 17-inch by 17-inch quarter-inch thick slab of aluminum I have as a heat spreader on this thing to keep it really flat for that
Yeah,
larger
that's what
space.
I've used too. I'm glad there's somebody else besides myself that's gone with aluminum heat spreader. That is perfect. I converted my replicator too with a aluminum bed, and then I have a heat It's basically a resistive, actually it's just an etched bed, and it has enough resistance to provide heat.
Yeah.
On that note, what are you using for the heating element? Is it a special type, or did you have
Oh,
somebody build a circuit board for it?
no, so it's there's a company called, well, it depends upon where you search for them on Alirubber or Alirubber. It's out of China, but they're actually one of the major manufacturers of silicone encapsulated heating elements.
Oh,
And I think that heated element, it's 380 by 380 millimeters, 800 watts, and I think it cost me $30. And
okay.
so
Now, and the
it's
voltage input on it is
it's
110?
Yep, but you can specify whatever you want.
Okay.
That's what's really nice about them is they're really used to making custom. So you email them and you say, I want it to be 200 by 400. I want two thermistors in it here and here. I want I want the bed segmented so only one half of it heats up, but I can turn on the other one. You tell them what you want, and they'll custom make it. And the prices are, well, they're China prices, so it's pretty
So
impressive.
it's
But
fantastic. And a good this Polymax material is actually from China as well. And a lot of people complain that you get China variants, but I'm assuming there are still a lot of like in this country, there are people that have quality and there are people that don't have quality, and it depends on who you talk to in China. And like I said, this filament company, gosh, I wish I remember the name. I apologize for that, but I'll send you a link to them. But yeah, there's number of people who really can do some great stuff. And so what you're telling me is that this company provides you whatever you want and that meets your specifications.
yeah,
I'm
yeah,
assuming
it's
without a
build to
lot of.
order. Yep.
Um, do me a favor, Eric, and make sure that I get these links so I can put them in the show notes on the YouTube channel when this gets done, because I want to go out there because I want to
Yeah.
order one.
Yeah.
But the other thing is, if you have on GitHub or the circuit design of that AC, I'd like to get a link to that as well.
Yeah.
I know I want to use that, and if I can borrow from somebody else's design with their permission, that really expedites getting things done. So I
Yeah.
appreciate that. So on that note, let's kind of move on. We've uh, gone through the printer pretty much, and I really appreciate you spending some time because you've obviously put some time yourself in coming up with the best way to do things with it, and I would like to use some of those opportunities myself, and I'll make sure over the next week I'll promote this to make sure other people find out about you because you're just a wealth of knowledge, and as I identified already, you have an open invitation to spend 10 minutes in our 3D in review and kind of talk about what you want to for that 10 minutes, and I'd really love to hear more. Let's see, what are we running? Gosh, we're only 45 minutes into it. Time flies. So let's kind of move on to, we talked about the Spider version 2 already, and we talked about materials. One other thing that I noticed, and the reason I want to bring it up is because I'm a fan of it too, and it's just now seems to be getting more public attention, and that is, and I'll jump back to your Google Plus page. Let's see if I can find it. And that is the Winbook 801. Isn't this a great little tablet? It is, I was looking for one, and the reason for it is that I control, I can't, Matter, that's not Matter Control. Can't think of the name of the program now. Sorry, Steve. I don't know if you know Steve Hernandez. He's also from out in that area. He's developed an SLA control program that runs
Oh.
under Windows, and we have the little RP, which is behind me. I don't know if you're familiar with SLA or delve into it, but we have a guy down in Santa Barbara, Brad Hill, who designed this thing, put it out on Kickstarter, and immediately was extremely successful. So we've been in conversations. We've done a few tutorials on it. But one of the things that I did is I used one of these, I guess I originally used an Acer, but the problem with the Acer is the Acer, and I'll actually go to my screen here and bring up your little YouTube video. But the problem with the Acer is it doesn't have the ability to charge while you're using your USB port, which to
Yep.
me is like, duh, why didn't you do that? And even though you're able to let it run for a little while, and then here comes along this device, which is far cheaper. I don't know what you got yours for, but I was able to get one for, I think, $100. And this is the 801, which is the 8-inch, not the 7-inch. And the great thing about it, and I noticed that you created a bracket for it, is that it supports a standard USB port, which is
It's
unheard of in these tablets, and obviously it's probably one of the reasons. So you're hooking up your, you're going to be using that for, do you use the USB port?
Yeah,
Yes,
so
you do.
the micro USB is for charging, and I've got just on the underside of the printer there, just a little USB power brick wired into the mains. Um, and then, yeah, the full-size USB port, 2 gigs of RAM, that newer Atom processor.
A
This
little
was
plug for Simplify 3D. That's I was going to ask you what slicer. That's the one that we've had on several times, and it's one of my go-to. They've come out with a new version that has actually improved things. But I'll let you go ahead and keep talking.
Yeah, yeah. So I had a model a while ago that when I first started printing, it was this Lien. It's out there on my out on my Google Plus posts, but a highly supported print that I wanted to make for my son, and I couldn't get it. First, without even tuning any settings, first print on Simplify 3D, and it did it perfectly, and the supports broke away, leaving no scars, and that it sold me. It was worth every penny, and it's made really great prints for me ever since. Its ability to tune inside and outside, perimeter speeds, and just all the tweakability in it. I don't think there's anything that competes with it, to be perfectly
No,
honest.
and I
But
think it's justified that there's a price attached to it, and they give free updates to it. And
yeah,
their latest update, you talked about supports. Now you have manual control of it. And I've already found myself utilizing that, especially in fine areas where
yeah,
sometimes your component extrusions match the size of some other support structures. So now you can go down to 1 millimeter, and you can put them wherever you want to, and eliminate others, so you can vary the size of them. So I think that's a big strength, and already put it to use. And as you said, you can tweak everything, but more importantly, you can create profiles of everything. So you can
yeah.
always go back to a new one so you don't forget anything. And if you've ever worked with the MakerBot, and I don't know if it's improved, they've tried to keep everything localized to certain general, and if you want to tweak it, you've got to go into a text file. So I'm glad that Simplify 3D is out there. This is what I used with my MakerBot as well. I also can use it with my Deltas, so it's been my go-to printer. I use it for 4 different printers now. I had an Ultimaker, and I sadly I had to sell it, but so
Yeah,
it's
so
pretty cool.
as
And
yeah, as far
go
as
ahead.
the tablet goes, I just think it's a really great bang for the buck. I went with the one with a little bit more internal storage, a little bit larger screen size. You can get ones that can do, for like you said, $80 to $100. I think mine was one. I think I got it for 169 on sale. But the fact that it can run, this software, I can run, AutoCAD 123. What
Mm.
do they call that? 123D
123D
design.
design. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and FreeCAD and other things on it. So I spend
Yes.
most of my computing power on my desktop. It's got 12 hard drives in it and gobs of RAM, and I don't want to have to put a lot of money into, let's say, a laptop that I'm only going to take. When I go down to this Midwest Rep festival, I don't want to have to afford an $800, $1,000 laptop just to run a printer. So this is a really great combo. I'm going to be able to run both of my printers off of this and slicing and doing everything else, and it fits in my back pocket.
Well, I'll tell you what I used it for, and it's one of the reasons I brought it up. I'm a big fan of this particular Winbook. You can buy them at Micro Centers. The sad thing is you
Hmm.
can only buy it at a Micro Center. You can't buy it online, so hopefully they'll change that as more and more attention comes to it. But it is a very good price, and they offer all the features, full USB port as well as a micro port for charging, which is a big plus. And the reason for it, I'll show you what I have. As I mentioned, I went to Real 2015, and I also went to CES with this. I don't know if you can see it, but I have created using a Padcaster, which was for an iOS, an iPad mini, but I've converted it using some gaffer's tape into a full, what do you call it, streaming broadcast system. I had a HD camcorder here. I had a 920 webcam, which is what I used for the streaming. Over here, I had a Zoom H5, so I had 2 channels of XLR, mic for my co-host Chris, as well as a headset for myself. I had a 4-port USB port hub here that was powered through a battery pack, which also powered this. So I got 6 hours of battery charge on this. I was able to put it on a monopod. Over here, I had a V360, which is a new panoramic camera, but it was all being driven by this little Winbook here. And I don't know if you're aware of this, Google Hangouts on Air has to have either a Windows or a Macintosh type device to control the production or the originator. The only thing that you can do on an iOS device or an Android device is use it as a client. So having an actual small Windows tablet, I was able to produce the whole thing right here, mobile. So I'm a big fan of it. So if you've never heard of Winbook, look into it, because I think now you can get that version you're talking for, I think, $130. It's very reasonable. Do you have the 32 gig or the 64? Did they even make a 64?
I think it's 32 gig, and that's one downside is Windows has taken up a big chunk of that, and I installed the Office, because you get a free year's subscription to Office 365 with it too. I mean, the value buried in this thing is kind of ridiculous. And so, but that does take up a fair amount of space, so I think I'm going to have to pare some things down, because 32 gigs for a computer versus a tablet, isn't quite as much. It's definitely a decent amount for a tablet, but not as much for a computer.
Yeah, do a little search. There's some tablet, what do you want to call it, scripts that will go through there. There's a hidden partition that it will remove, and then it will add it back to your C drive, and it gives you, I don't know, 8 gigs back or something like that. So you can get a substantial amount of that. So keep that in mind. That's what I did. So, and I don't use it for any more than what I'm using it for here. And if you're using it, the other important thing is it makes a great controller, because you have the actual application. You can run Bluetooth keyboards and mice with it. So you can have a full keyboard or computer that controls your printer at a very minimal expense. And so I'm a big fan of it. I'm glad to see somebody else has caught on to it, and Steve Hernandez can tell you the same thing. A lot of people swear by these, and I'm a big fan of them too. The Raspberry Pis, and especially the new version, which I just got in, but it doesn't have an LCD screen. And when you start adding all that together, you're almost getting to the same price as this, and you get a Windows on top of it. Now, of course, the new Raspberry Pi version 2 will run Windows as well. I don't know if you heard about that.
Yep,
so
I heard that.
To me, buy this Winbook. You won't be unhappy with it. So on that note, I'm going to let you end it for us. We've talked for almost an hour. So I knew that we would. I know there's a lot of shop talk here, so I appreciate you taking the time with me. Again, the invitation is out there for you to come on and be with us on our show. And obviously, looking at your Google Plus, I'll jump back to it real quick. You've got a ton of information. So if you have an opportunity, why don't you go out to HercuLien at Google Plus and check out his site. He has tons of information out there. I don't know if you have a website or a blog, or if you're using Google Plus. But right now I see you've got a lot of stuff out there, a lot of YouTube videos. I'm going to make sure I put links on both of these out in the show notes. But yeah, you're a wealth of knowledge, and hopefully you'll accept my invitation and have you on a regular guest every Friday. So on that note, Eric, you have the final word.
Okay. Well, I just want to say, thank you for having me on today, and also just thank you especially to everyone who came before me. The only reason I'm able to do this is because the community for 3D printing has been set up in such a way that people are open and sharing. I'm sure there's plenty of people who could have been making money trying to patent this stuff up, but instead everyone is opening their hard drives, opening their minds, and spreading this information. That's why I think it's so engaging, and that's why I think it's so popular. Is the barrier to entry is becoming so low. So I'm just really happy with this as a hobby because of the community, and I love giving back to the community. So if you guys ever run into some questions, hit me up online. Google Plus is kind of my main hunting grounds. With the Reddit 3D printing community a little bit, but basically Google Plus, and hit me up. And if anyone has the opportunity to go down to Maker Rep Rap Fest down in Goshen, Indiana, March 20th through the 22nd, I'll be there. Martin from Bondtech is now going to be there. The
Oh,
guys
great.
from E3D, Sanjay is going to be out there, so it's going to be a hoot. So it's a small town, but just a bunch of people with big minds and small egos out there, which is what I liked about it last year. So if people have
Sounds
opportunity,
fun.
they should make it out.
Well, and I hope you get to see John Ollie. He's the one that sponsored this thing. Him and sorry, Steve, I can't remember your last name, but the two of them together out at See Me CNC are the ones
Yep.
that hosted this. And so I hope you get an opportunity. I'll send a virtual introduction so that you guys can find each other and hopefully work something out. But again, Eric, appreciate it. You're a wealth of knowledge. I hope to have you on regularly. And on that note, bye.